And now so now we're going to talk about capital formation. And this, as far as I'm concerned, is actually the most important topic. I mentioned this earlier when I talked about Bitcoin, that the Bitcoin white paper introduced, because a lot of the externalities that we experience today in the not only in the financial system, but overall around capital formation and the divide between the haves and the have-nots are externalities that are based in the way we are doing capital formation. So capital formation today is largely done by the way of a for-profit company. And so what's the problem of for-profit companies? Well, for-profit companies have a lot of different participants. So you got the obvious ones, you got the operators, and you got the employees, and then you got clients, you got suppliers, and you got maybe shareholders if you're public. And then you have some interaction with whatever government you are being organized under. And so the point there being is all these particular groups have different interests. So employees typically care about the largest salary they can obtain from the corporation. Clients typically care about the best service that they can receive for their money. Suppliers want to make the most profit from the goods and services they supply to the companies, and so forth and so forth. So the overriding principle here is that there's a total misalignment of interest that's being created most often, not always, but most often in for-profit companies. And the one example that I've been harping on for more than a decade at this particular point in time, that probably everybody that's participating in this call right now is affected with, is the example of the for-profit company called Alphabet. And if you've never heard of Alphabet, that's because Alphabet is a new creation as a holding company for a number of different companies, including most prominently Google. So if you go to alphabet.xyz, and that's literally the domain, you will find the P&L and so forth of the holding company for Google called Alphabet Inc. So what's the problem with Alphabet Inc. being a for-profit company? Well, the purpose, the objective, the overriding algorithm, if you will, of any for-profit company, specifically if it's publicly listed, is to increase shareholder value. How does Google increase shareholder value? Well, it's selling quote-unquote advertising. And I say quote-unquote advertising because Google, and for that matter, Facebook, Twitter, and a lot of the other companies that you're engaging with on a daily basis, they actually stopped selling advertising solutions and expanded their services to sell what I call social engineering as a service solutions. So as soon as you put the letter E into Google, you're top of funnel for that particular purpose, and it's going to start directing your eyeballs towards that particular purpose of making Google money. And then secondarily, it might solve you with a quote-unquote search result. And the reason, yet again, why I say quote-unquote, because you're not searching the World Wide Web. You're running a query against the database maintained by a for-profit company. You're not on the World Wide Web. You're not using the World Wide Web. We're building the World Wide Web right now. I'm going to explain why that is. And so where DAOs, Decentralized Autonomous Organizations, come into the pictures, they do the following. You got owners. So I might own mining equipment, and you got investors, and they might invest into the mining reward. You got users of a particular blockchain. You got employees, and they could either have a formal contract or not. You got suppliers to those. The larger point there being, though, is what decentralized autonomous organizations achieve is the alignment of interest. It's actually the most important game mechanic that the Bitcoin white paper introduced. And here's why. So a lot of times, there's explanations out there that explain blockchains and equating the decentralized nature with the distributed nature, as we are distributing compute, and that equals decentralization. And they're trying to measure decentralization on a certain scale that's usually attached to how many people are actually running nodes and how many people are actually mining these mining rewards. And that is largely misguided, because the main decentralization is the decentralization of incentives, because put yourself into a position where you are the only person that is running a node for that particular blockchain. And based on the fact that the blockchain moves in a certain way and fulfills its function, people are start to use it. So if you were the only one running the node and you start abusing that particular power, it would most likely lead to the immediate deterioration of the mining reward. People wouldn't be interested in buying the mining reward. They stop trusting your particular node, your particular chain altogether. So actually, in the particular case of centralization, it would be entirely against the self-interest. That's the point here, of the maintainer of that chain to act in any nefarious ways. But overall, the important part to understand is that the decentralization hinges on the fact that everybody in the world right now can download a node from any of the public blockchains and start participating in their chain. You don't have to enter into a formal contract. No one has to know what country you're a citizen of, or if you're even a citizen of any country. And you can participate in the same way you participate if you're living in a free country in what we call the World Wide Web today. So this year, we think we're going to see a lot more implementations of that paradigm, because as I mentioned, it's the most powerful paradigm. And so here are some of the examples that we kind of predict that we think are winners. Decentralized Nft Marketplaces, by the way, we're going to talk a little bit about OpenSea and how it's not decentralized yet and probably never will be. There's a public for-profit company behind that, which introduces its own ideas, its own policies, its own problems, and its own shareholders. And maybe to drive this home, we'll just simply compare the largest US bank with Bitcoin. So JP Morgan Chase has 250,000 employees, whereas Bitcoin has somewhere around 10 core developers contributing to the code. Again, I'm discounting for all the volunteers that are consistently auditing the code, that are consistently downloading the new node software and whatnot, and audit that code. So there's a lot of volunteer work being contributed. But the larger point there is, so Bitcoin, I think the number right now is incorrect. I think it's just under $1 trillion in market cap. It really doesn't matter, obviously, but it's significantly higher of that of JP Morgan Chase. And also, if you look at the employee count, and that should be something rather obvious. I meant to do a separate slide for that and didn't, but we might as well address that here. So there is this whole false narrative around Bitcoin being bad for the environment, being bad for energy consumption, having a large carbon footprint. That is utter dumb propaganda. And the reason why I'm saying this, it takes 3 sentences to defeat this argument. And also by the comparison alone here, you can probably see how you can defeat this argument. So last year, I don't have the exact number in front of me. I think it was anywhere between 6 and 9 cents that Bitcoin miners paid for kilowatt hours for mining. Bitcoin mining is a very, very, very competitive landscape, and it's global in nature. It's the most efficient market. So if you looked at your electricity bill, you probably figured out that you actually paid more than 9 cents for your kilowatt hours. Specifically if you're in the United States, I think I pay about 16 cents here. So the point there being, though, is any energy creator who could sell the energy to me or to you and make more of that would be selling it to you or me and not sell it to Bitcoin miners. So to put this flippantly, Bitcoin is going where there's extra energy that's already being produced. And that's just setting aside the Bitcoins that are already being produced using natural power resources such as hydro energy. But yeah, on a very simple level, that has always been a red herring. But then also, specifically, if you're comparing banks, and we just have the example of one bank here specifically in front of you, just think of this from a common sense perspective. There's 250,000 people that probably a lot of them still drive to work every day. They start their car and they spend gasoline, they pollute the environment, they get to work, they turn on their laptop, they turn on their computer, they turn on their lights. So all of them spend energy. And why I haven't, I tried to do the individual math and I kind of failed a little bit, but I think the energy consumption of one large bank equals the energy consumption and carbon footprint of Bitcoin. And so if you combine all the banks, it's a multiple of that. The larger point there being is that honestly, the number of commercial banks that we need is somewhere between 0 and 1, because I think of commercial banks and commercial bankers in the same way that I think about those dispatchers that people might have seen in old movies where they're switching plugs around for legacy phone systems. And these functions are largely not needed. These feeds are largely not needed. I assume the last time that you send an email, you didn't put a stamp on that email yet. We still allow this to happen today for financial service transactions. And from a technology perspective, that is a solved problem and has been a solved problem for a decade right now. And it's very unfortunate that we allow this to happen, and we're creating all these window dressing solutions that obfuscate the fact that this is legacy technology that we should have replaced, and we should have replaced the companies that maintain these legacy technologies. So I'm always talking about data-based solutions in that context and those that maintain those.